In June 1942, fewer than 30 German submarines sank 143 Allied ships, over 700,000 tons of steel sent to the ocean floor in a single month. 11 months later, in May 1943, the hunters became the hunted. 41 U-boats destroyed for only 47 ships sunk. This is the story of the most dramatic reversal of fortune in naval warfare history, told from inside the steel coffins of the U-boat fleet. The German U-boat wolf packs represented one of the most terrifying weapons of the Second World War. They nearly severed Britain's Atlantic lifeline. They threatened to starve an entire nation into submission. For 2 years, they achieved kill ratios that made submarine warfare appear strategically decisive. Then, in the span of a single spring, everything collapsed. This is the story of how technology, intelligence, and industrial might transformed confident hunters into fatalistic prey, and how 30,000 men paid the price for tactical brilliance rendered obsolete by systemic change. From the cramped control rooms of Type 7 U-boats, the war looked winnable. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood in his headquarters at Naval, France, orchestrating a new form of naval warfare. The Rudeltaktik, Wolfpack tactics, represented his vision of coordinated submarine warfare. Individual U-boats operating alone had proven ineffective in the First World War. Dönitz believed concentrated attacks by coordinated groups would overwhelm convoy escorts and inflict catastrophic losses. The first attempts in late 1939 failed. Communication broke down. Coordination proved impossible across vast ocean distances. But by mid-1940, with improved radio control and the Enigma machine providing secure encrypted transmissions, Dönitz had solved the puzzle. The system worked with brutal efficiency. U-boats patrolled in lines across likely convoy routes in the mid-Atlantic. Each boat transmitted daily position reports to BDU headquarters using Enigma encrypted communications. When a U-boat detected a convoy, it shadowed the target and reported its position, speed, and heading. Dönitz then vectored multiple U-boats to mass against the convoy, creating coordinated multi-submarine attacks. The individual commanders operated independently once the attack commenced, but the concentration of force overwhelmed the limited escort coverage available in 1940 and 1941. The results spoke for themselves. Early war kill ratios reached 10 to 15 merchant ships sunk per U-boat lost. With only 20 to 30 operational U-boats initially, Germany achieved devastating results. Monthly sinkings often exceeded 250,000 to 500,000 tons of shipping. U-boat crews experienced what they called the happy time, a period of confident hunting with a psychological sense of invincibility and the thrill of the hunt. Crew diaries describe the excitement of successful attacks, the adrenaline-filled moments of firing torpedo salvos into packed convoys, and the satisfaction of watching merchant ships sink beneath the waves. The mid-Atlantic air gap provided the crucial advantage. This stretch of ocean, 600 miles across, lay beyond the range of land-based aircraft from Britain, Iceland, or Newfoundland. In this black pit, U-boats could operate on the surface with impunity. They could run at higher speeds on diesel engines rather than slow, battery-powered submerged transit. They could coordinate their attacks without fear of air attack. The darkness became their ally. Moonlight silhouetted merchant ships while keeping U-boats invisible in the shadows. Crew members described the attacks as a chaotic ballet, multiple boats firing from different angles, escorts racing to respond, explosions lighting the night sky, and U-boats escaping in the confusion. But how exactly did these submarines coordinate their attacks across thousands of miles of empty ocean to achieve such devastating efficiency? The Black Pit was not a place. It was a gap in Allied defenses stretching 600 miles across the mid-Atlantic where no aircraft could reach. The tactical mechanics of Wolfpack operations followed a precise pattern. U-boats formed patrol lines across known convoy routes in the central Atlantic. These lines stretched for hundreds of miles, with individual boats spaced 10 to 20 miles apart. Each boat maintained radio silence, except for daily position reports to BDU headquarters. When a U-boat detected a convoy, Usually by visual sighting or hydrophone contact, it broke radio silence to report the sighting. The boat then shadowed the convoy, staying on the surface beyond visual range, transmitting updated position reports every few hours. At Naval, Donitz and his staff plotted the convoy's course on massive wall charts. They calculated which U-boats could reach the target and issued movement orders via Enigma encrypted transmissions. The boats converged on the convoy like wolves gathering for a hunt. This concentration of force represented the core advantage of Rudel tactic. Instead of random encounters between individual submarines and convoys, the Germans created deliberate, coordinated mass attacks. Once assembled, the wolf pack attacked at night. U-boats approached on the surface, using their low profile and the darkness for concealment. They positioned themselves on the convoy's dark side, the side away from the moon, so that merchant ships appeared as clear silhouettes while the U-boats remained invisible shadows. Individual commanders chose their own attack angles and targets. There was no tactical coordination during the actual attack. Each boat operated independently, firing torpedo salvos and then breaking away to reload and attack again. The limited escort coverage in the Black Pit meant convoys were vulnerable to being overwhelmed. A typical convoy in 1941 might have 4 to 6 escorts protecting 30 to 40 merchant ships. When 6 or 8 U-boats attacked simultaneously from multiple angles, the escorts could not defend the entire convoy perimeter. They raced from one contact to another, dropping depth charges on submerged boats or attempting to drive off surfaced attackers with gunfire. But while escorts engaged one U-boat, others pressed home their attacks. Crew testimonies described the chaos: torpedoes crossing in the water, explosions, burning ships, and the constant fear of collision in the darkness. The system appeared unstoppable. The Allies could not defend convoys in the air gap. They lacked sufficient escorts to prevent Wolfpack penetration. The Enigma code remained secure, allowing free communication between U-boats and headquarters. From the perspective of U-boat crews, the tactical situation favored them completely. They hunted with confidence. They returned to French bases as heroes. They believed they were winning the war. This system of coordinated radio communication and surface attacks seemed unstoppable, until the Allies began deploying technologies the U-boat crews had never imagined. 700,000 tons in 30 days, the equivalent of an entire convoy disappearing beneath the waves every 3 days. June 1942 represented the absolute peak of U-boat effectiveness. In that single month, U-boats sank 143 Allied ships, totaling over 700,000 tons. The statistics revealed a maritime catastrophe. Merchant ships were disappearing faster than Allied shipyards could replace them. The tonnage war, the calculation of ships sunk versus ships built, appeared unwinnable for the Allies. Britain's survival depended on Atlantic convoys delivering food, fuel, and war materials. If the sinking rate continued, Britain would face starvation and economic collapse within months. The kill ratios told the story of U-boat dominance. For every U-boat lost, 10 to 15 merchant ships went to the bottom. These numbers made submarine warfare appear strategically decisive. Germany had found a weapon that could force Britain out of the war without invading the island. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Even accounting for increased Allied shipbuilding, the Germans believed they could sink ships faster than the Allies could build them. U-boat crews returned to bases at Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, and Brest as conquering heroes. They were celebrated in propaganda films. They received medals and promotions. Their bases featured massive concrete submarine pens, bomb-proof bunkers that protected the boats from Allied air raids. The pens symbolized German confidence in the U-boat arm. These were not temporary facilities. They were permanent installations built for a long war of attrition in the Atlantic. The psychological impact on U-boat crews during this period cannot be overstated. They genuinely believed they were winning. Patrol after patrol brought successful attacks. Convoys seemed helpless. Escorts appeared incompetent. The mid-Atlantic remained a German hunting ground. Crew diaries from this period overflow with confidence. They describe the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of successful torpedo shots, and the camaraderie of a winning service. These men saw themselves as the tip of the spear in Germany's war effort. They believed their actions would determine the war's outcome. But even as U-boat commanders celebrated their greatest victories, Allied scientists and strategists were assembling the technologies that would transform hunters into prey. The U-boat commanders called it technology shock, the sudden, terrifying realization that the enemy could see in the dark. The Allied response to the U-boat threat came not from a single wonder weapon, but from the convergence of multiple technological innovations deployed simultaneously. Each technology targeted a specific vulnerability in Wolfpack tactics. Together, they created a system the U-boats could not counter. Centimetric radar represented the first shock. The Type 271 radar operated at 10 centimeters wavelength, a dramatic improvement over earlier meter wavelength sets. This shorter wavelength could detect a U-boat's conning tower at night and in fog at ranges of several miles. The technology became widespread on escort vessels by late 1942. For U-boat crews, the implications were terrifying. The darkness that had protected their surface attacks suddenly became transparent. Escorts could detect surfaced U-boats and maneuver to intercept before the U-boat detected the escort. The element of surprise shifted from attacker to defender. HF/DF, high-frequency direction finding, called Huff-Duff by Allied sailors, turned U-boat communications into a tracking beacon. The equipment detected and triangulated the bearing of U-boat radio transmissions. By late 1942, HF/DF sets were standard equipment on escort vessels and at shore stations. When a U-boat transmitted a position report to BDU headquarters, escorts could immediately determine the bearing to the transmitter. Multiple escorts taking simultaneous bearings could triangulate the U-boat's exact position. The radio communications essential to rudal-tactic coordination became a fatal vulnerability. Every transmission announced the U-boat's location to any escort within range. The lead light mounted on aircraft created sudden, blinding illumination that allowed night attacks on surfaced U-boats with no warning. Aircraft equipped with radar could detect surfaced U-boats at night, but lacked the ability to attack accurately in darkness. The lead light solved this problem. The aircraft approached using radar, then, at the last moment, switched on a powerful searchlight. The U-boat crew, accustomed to darkness, was suddenly blinded by intense light. Before they could react, the aircraft dropped depth charges. First operational use occurred in mid-1942. U-boat crews described the experience as a blinding terror, surfacing to recharge batteries, then sudden light and explosions with no warning. Hedgehog forward-throwing mortars eliminated the warning time that depth charges provided. Traditional depth charges rolled off the stern of an escort vessel, giving U-boat commanders several seconds of warning as the escort passed overhead. This warning allowed skilled commanders to execute evasive maneuvers, changing depth and course to avoid the depth charge pattern. Hedgehog fired a pattern of contact-fused mortars ahead of the attacking ship. The projectiles only exploded on contact with the submarine's hull. There was no warning, no time to evade. U-boat crews described Hedgehog attacks as unpredictable terror, explosions that came without the telltale sound of an escort passing overhead. Escort carriers and very long-range B-24 Liberator aircraft began closing the mid-Atlantic air gap that had been the Wolfpack's safe hunting ground. Escort carriers, small aircraft carriers converted from merchant ship hulls, provided continuous air cover for convoys throughout the Atlantic crossing. Very long-range Liberators, equipped with extra fuel tanks, could patrol the former Black Pit. By mid-1943, the air gap effectively ceased to exist. U-boats could no longer operate on the surface with impunity. Aircraft equipped with radar and lead lights hunted them relentlessly. These technologies converged in the spring of 1943, creating a single month that would break the back of the U-boat fleet forever. In 30 days, the U-boat arm lost more submarines than in the entire previous year, and the crews who survived brought back stories of a new kind of warfare they could not fight. May 1943 saw 41 U-boats destroyed while sinking only 47 merchant ships, a complete inversion of the 10 to 15 to 1 kill ratios from the happy time. The statistics revealed a catastrophic collapse. For the first time in the war, U-boats were being destroyed faster than they could sink ships. The tonnage war had reversed. The hunters had become the hunted. The operational reality for U-boat crews transformed overnight. Radar-equipped aircraft appeared without warning, attacking surfaced U-boats before crews could dive. The 45 seconds required to clear the bridge and submerge became a death sentence. Aircraft diving out of clouds or darkness gave no warning. The first indication of attack was often the roar of engines and the splash of depth charges. Crews described a psychological terror of sudden death from above. The sky became an enemy. Every moment on the surface carried the risk of instant annihilation. Aggressive hunter-killer support groups using HF/DF pursued U-boats that transmitted position reports. These support groups operated independently of convoys, hunting U-boats offensively rather than defending merchant ships reactively. When a U-boat transmitted to BDU headquarters, multiple escorts took bearings and converged on the transmitter. The Wolfpack coordination that had been the system's strength became suicidal. Every radio transmission invited attack. Dönitz ordered continued transmissions to maintain tactical control. His crews paid the price. U-boat crews experienced a complete psychological transformation from confident hunters to hunted prey. The unpredictability of hedgehog attacks and radar detection created chronic terror. Crew testimonies from this period describe constant fear. They could not see their enemies. They could not predict when attacks would come. The technologies arrayed against them operated beyond their senses. Radar detected them before they could see escorts. Aircraft attacked from darkness or clouds. Hedgehog exploded without warning. The confidence and thrill of the happy time evaporated, replaced by fatalistic acceptance of probable death. By the end of May, Dönitz made the unprecedented decision to withdraw U-boats from the North Atlantic convoy routes. This withdrawal effectively conceded defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic. The Wolfpacks could no longer operate in their primary hunting ground. The Mid-Atlantic, once the site of Germany's greatest victories, had become a killing zone for U-boats. The tactical situation had reversed so completely and so suddenly that continued operations meant sending crews to certain death with no reasonable prospect of success. Black May was not an anomaly. It was the beginning of a death spiral from which the U-boat fleet would never recover. The Black Pit, 600 miles of ocean where U-boats had hunted freely, disappeared in less than 6 months. The elimination of the Mid-Atlantic air gap represented a fundamental shift in the strategic balance. Escort carriers provided continuous air cover for convoys throughout the Atlantic crossing. These small carriers operated 4 to 6 aircraft, enough to maintain constant patrols around the convoy. The aircraft carried radar, depth charges, and often lee lights. Their presence forced U-boats to remain submerged whenever aircraft were nearby. Submerged, U-boats could only make 7 to 8 knots, slower than convoy speed. They could not overtake convoys to reach attack positions. They could not mass for coordinated attacks. The Wolfpack system depended on surface mobility. Escort carriers eliminated that mobility. Very long-range B-24 Liberator aircraft equipped with radar and depth charges patrolled the former Black Pit, making surface operations suicidal. These aircraft, equipped with extra fuel tanks, could patrol areas previously beyond aircraft range. They worked in coordination with convoy routing, patrolling ahead of convoys and along their flanks. A U-boat attempting to reach an attack position would encounter aircraft long before reaching the convoy. The choice became binary: remain submerged and lose contact with the convoy, or surface and risk air attack. U-boats could no longer safely transit on the surface to reach patrol positions. This forced extended submerged operations that reduced effectiveness and increased crew exhaustion. Batteries drained quickly when running submerged. Crews had to surface frequently to recharge batteries using diesel engines, but surfacing invited air attack. The operational tempo became unsustainable. Boats spent increasing amounts of time hiding rather than hunting. Patrol effectiveness collapsed. Boats returned to base, having accomplished nothing beyond survival. The zones that had recorded the highest U-boat successes in 1942 now became areas of record U-boat losses. The Mid-Atlantic, once a safe hunting ground, became the most dangerous area for U-boats. Continuous air coverage made wolfpack concentration impossible. Boats attempting to mass against convoys were detected and attacked before they could coordinate. The tactical advantage had shifted completely to the Allies. The geographic safe zone that had been essential to wolfpack tactics simply ceased to exist. But even as the tactical situation collapsed, an even more fundamental problem was destroying any hope of U-boat victory. The Allies could build ships faster than submarines could sink them. American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than it took to train a U-boat crew, one every 8 hours at peak production. Allied production of 2,710 Liberty ships in 1943 alone overwhelmed the 300 U-boats Germany could produce in the same period. The mathematics of the tonnage war had become impossible for Germany. Even if U-boats returned to 1942 effectiveness levels, they could never sink ships faster than American shipyards could build them. The industrial disparity was simply too great. Over 700 destroyers and corvettes produced by Allied shipyards meant escort strength was continuously increasing rather than depleting. Early in the war, convoy escort had been a resource-starved mission. There were never enough escorts. Convoys sailed with inadequate protection. By 1943, the situation had reversed. Escort strength increased monthly. New destroyers and corvettes, equipped with the latest radar, sonar, and weapons, entered service continuously. Support groups hunted U-boats offensively. The defensive posture of 1941 had given way to aggressive offensive action. Convoy losses that had seemed catastrophic in 1942 could now be replaced in weeks rather than months. The Liberty ship program revolutionized merchant ship construction. Standardized designs, prefabricated sections, and assembly line techniques reduced construction time to weeks. A merchant ship sunk in the Atlantic could be replaced before the U-boat that sank it returned to base. This production capacity made the tonnage war mathematically unwinnable for Germany. No level of U-boat success could overcome this industrial advantage. The industrial disparity extended beyond ships to every aspect of the campaign. Allied factories produced radar sets, sonar equipment, depth charges, and hedgehog mortars in vast quantities. U-boats faced not just more escorts, but better equipped escorts with superior technology. German production could not match this output. Bomb damage to German factories further reduced production capacity. The strategic situation had become hopeless from an industrial perspective. The production numbers told a story of inevitable defeat, but there was another invisible weapon destroying the U-boat fleet. The Allies were reading their mail. Every time a U-boat commander transmitted a position report to BDU headquarters, he was also telling the Allies exactly where to find him. Ultra-intelligence from broken Enigma codes allowed the Allies to read U-boat position reports, patrol assignments, and attack coordination in near real time. The captures of key materials from U-110, U-559, and weather ships provided the cryptographic breaks that enabled British codebreakers at Bletchley Park to decrypt German naval Enigma transmissions. By mid-1941, and consistently from 1943 onward, the Allies could read most U-boat traffic within hours of transmission. Convoys could be routed around known U-boat patrol lines, turning the Wolfpack search system into wasted fuel and time. When BDU ordered U-boats to form a patrol line across a convoy route, Allied intelligence read the orders and rerouted the convoy around the patrol line. U-boats waited in empty ocean while convoys passed hundreds of miles away. The elaborate coordination system became counterproductive. The more effort Dönitz put into positioning patrol lines, the more information he provided to Allied convoy routing. The radio communications essential to rudal tactic coordination became a tracking mechanism. HF/DF and Ultra worked together synergistically. HF/DF provided immediate tactical warning of nearby U-boats. Ultra provided strategic intelligence about U-boat dispositions, patrol areas, and operational orders. Together, they created a comprehensive picture of U-boat operations. Support groups could be vectored to areas of U-boat concentration. Ambushes could be prepared. The information advantage shifted decisively to the Allies. Dönitz never fully realized that Enigma was compromised. He suspected intelligence leaks. He investigated whether agents or captured personnel had revealed information. He considered whether the Allies had broken Enigma, but rejected the possibility based on German cryptographic experts' assurances that Enigma was unbreakable. He continued to rely on radio-coordinated tactics that fed intelligence directly to Allied convoy routing and hunter-killer groups. This failure of intelligence assessment prolonged the slaughter of U-boat crews. With their communications compromised, their safe zones eliminated, and their enemies' production unstoppable, U-boat crews faced a new reality. Every patrol was likely a death sentence. The veterans of the Happy Time who survived to 1944 no longer spoke of the thrill of the hunt. They spoke of waiting to die. U-boat crews experienced a complete psychological transformation from the confidence and thrill of the Happy Time to chronic terror and fatalism. The men who had celebrated victories in 1941 faced a fundamentally different war by 1943. They boarded their boats knowing the statistics. They understood that most would not return. The question was not whether they would die, but when and how. Survivor testimony captured the despair with brutal clarity. One crew member recalled, "We know we are going to die, but we still go out." This fatalistic acceptance of near-certain death characterized late-war U-boat operations. Crews went through the motions of their duties with the knowledge that survival was statistically unlikely. Each patrol reduced their odds further. The accumulated stress of multiple patrols broke men psychologically long before enemy action killed them. The unpredictability of radar-equipped aircraft attacks and forward-throwing Hedgehog mortars created constant psychological stress with no warning or defense. Traditional depth charge attacks followed a pattern. Crews heard the escort's propellers passing overhead. They braced for the explosions. They executed evasive maneuvers. The pattern provided a sense of agency, the illusion that skilled seamanship could improve survival odds. Hedgehog eliminated this illusion. Explosions came without warning. There was no pattern to learn, no technique to master. Death arrived randomly and instantly. Crews described the blinding terror of the lee light emerging from darkness and the helplessness of being hunted by technologies they could neither see nor counter. The psychological impact of fighting an invisible enemy cannot be overstated. Radar detected them before they could see escorts or aircraft. Sonar tracked them underwater. HF/DF located them when they transmitted. They were visible to their enemies, while their enemies remained invisible. This fundamental asymmetry created a sense of helplessness that destroyed morale. The cramped conditions aboard Type 7 U-boats, the workhorses of the fleet, magnified the psychological stress. 44 men lived in a steel tube 180 feet long and 20 feet in diameter. They shared bunks in rotation. They went weeks without bathing. The air stank of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and fear. Condensation dripped constantly. Mold grew on every surface. These conditions were tolerable during the Happy Time when successful attacks provided psychological rewards. They became unbearable when patrols meant weeks of terror followed by likely death. This psychological collapse was not merely anecdotal. It was reflected in the most brutal casualty statistics of any military service in World War II. 3 out of every 4 men who served on U-boats never came home, the highest casualty rate of any branch of any military in World War II. Over 30,000 of 39,000 U-boat personnel were killed during the war, a 75% casualty rate unprecedented in modern military history. The numbers speak to a level of loss that defies comprehension. In any given group of 4 U-boat crew members, 3 died. The statistical probability of survival through multiple patrols approached 0. U-boat service became statistically more deadly than almost any other military role in World War II. The comparison to other high-casualty services makes the U-boat losses even more striking. RAF Bomber Command suffered approximately 44% casualties, catastrophic by any measure. Infantry on the Eastern Front faced death rates of 30 to 40% in major offensives. U-boat service exceeded all of these. Only certain specific units in specific battles approached comparable casualty rates, and those were measured in days or weeks. U-boat crews faced these odds for years. Late-war U-boat patrols became suicide missions. Crews knew that statistical survival was unlikely, and each patrol reduced their odds further. The mathematics were inescapable. A crew member who survived one patrol faced the same odds on the next patrol. The probability of surviving multiple patrols decreased geometrically. Veterans who survived 3 or 4 patrols understood they were living on borrowed time. Some requested transfers to other services. Most continued sailing because that was their duty, even knowing it meant death. The casualty rate reflected not just tactical defeat, but the complete obsolescence of the submarine as a surface-operating commerce raider against radar and air power. The Type 7 U-boats that formed the backbone of the fleet were designed for surface operations with crash dive capability for emergencies. They were not true submarines, but submersibles, surface ships that could temporarily hide underwater. Against radar and aircraft, this design became a death trap. The boats could not remain submerged long enough to evade persistent air coverage. They had to surface to recharge batteries. Every surfacing invited attack. The fundamental design of the weapon system had been rendered obsolete by technological change. Despite these catastrophic losses, Dönitz continued sending crews to sea, his tactical rigidity unable to adapt to a form of warfare that had fundamentally changed. Even as the casualty reports mounted, Dönitz continued to order coordinated surface attacks, the same tactics that had worked in 1941 but had become suicide missions by 1943. Karl Dönitz continued to rely on brutal tactic coordination and radio communication, even after Black May demonstrated these tactics were suicidal. The evidence was overwhelming. The casualty rates spoke for themselves. Yet Dönitz persisted in ordering Wolfpack operations, patrol lines, and coordinated attacks. His faith in the system he had created blinded him to the reality that technological change had rendered his tactics obsolete. Tactical rigidity and micromanagement from BDU headquarters prevented individual commanders from adapting to local conditions and new Allied capabilities. Dönitz maintained tight control over U-boat operations, issuing detailed movement orders and coordinating attacks from headquarters. This centralized control had been an advantage when it enabled concentration of force against poorly defended convoys. It became a fatal weakness when it prevented commanders from exercising initiative to counter new Allied tactics and technologies. Individual commanders who understood the changed tactical situation lacked the authority to adapt their operations. Dönitz's continued faith in Enigma security sent crews into combat with the assumption that their communications were secure. He investigated the possibility of compromise, but rejected it based on expert assurances that Enigma was mathematically unbreakable. This failure of intelligence assessment meant U-boats continued transmitting position reports and receiving detailed orders via radio, all of which the Allies read in near real time. The communications that enabled Wolfpack coordination became the mechanism of their destruction. The failure to develop effective countermeasures to radar, adapt to submerged operations, or acknowledge the fundamental shift in naval warfare prolonged the slaughter of U-boat crews. Germany did develop the snorkel, a device that allowed diesel engine operation while submerged at periscope depth, but deployed it too late and in insufficient numbers. The Type 21 U-boat, a revolutionary true submarine design with high submerged speed and endurance, entered production too late to affect the war's outcome. These technologies might have restored U-boat effectiveness, but Donitz's focus on maximizing production of obsolete Type 7 boats meant the new designs arrived too late. Hitler's interference compounded Donitz's failures. The Führer's obsession with surface warships diverted resources from U-boat production. His orders to continue operations regardless of losses for propaganda purposes sent crews to die in operationally meaningless missions. The strategic direction from the highest levels of German command showed a fundamental misunderstanding of the changed nature of the Atlantic battle. By 1945, the U-boat fleet that had once threatened to sever Britain's Atlantic lifeline had been reduced to a broken force, its crews sacrificed to a form of warfare that technology had rendered obsolete. The same crews who had celebrated sinking 700,000 tons in June 1942 were, 11 months later, being hunted to extinction in the same waters. The U-boat fleet's transformation from achieving 10 to 15 to 1 kill ratios to suffering 75% casualties represents one of the most dramatic reversals in military history. The arc from dominance to defeat occurred in less than a year. The speed of the collapse makes it even more remarkable. The U-boats did not gradually decline. They dominated, then suddenly and catastrophically collapsed. The convergence of radar, sonar, code breaking, air power, industrial production, and tactical adaptation created a system the U-boats could not counter. No single technology defeated the wolf packs. Radar alone would not have been decisive. Code breaking alone could be countered by radio discipline. Air power alone could be evaded by submerged operations. But the combination of all these factors simultaneously created an integrated system that addressed every U-boat capability and exploited every vulnerability. Wolfpack tactics that had seemed strategically decisive in 1942 became obsolete death traps by 1943. Radio coordination became a tracking beacon. Surface mobility became a fatal vulnerability. Concentration of force became concentration of targets. Every advantage the wolf packs had possessed reversed. The tactical system that had brought Germany to the brink of victory in the Atlantic became the mechanism of catastrophic defeat. The Battle of the Atlantic was ultimately won not by any single innovation, but by the integration of technology, intelligence, production, and tactical evolution that overwhelmed the U-boat fleet's ability to adapt. The Allies created a comprehensive system that operated at every level. Strategic intelligence from ultra-shaped convoy routing, tactical intelligence from HF/DF provided immediate warning, radar and sonar detected U-boats, aircraft and support groups attacked them, and industrial production replaced losses faster than U-boats could inflict them. This systemic approach proved unstoppable. The human cost of this technological and industrial victory remains staggering. 30,000 U-boat crew members died, 3 out of every 4 who served. They died in steel coffins at the bottom of the Atlantic. They died in sudden explosions from hedgehog attacks. They died trapped in sinking submarines as water flooded compartments. They died slowly from asphyxiation when batteries ran out and air turned toxic. The manner of their deaths was uniformly terrible. The claustrophobic horror of submarine warfare meant death came through drowning, crushing pressure, explosion, or suffocation. There were no good deaths aboard a U-boat. The transformation from confident hunters to fatalistic prey occurred in the span of months. Veterans who survived the entire war experienced both extremes. They remembered the thrill of the happy time, the confidence of 1941, the sense that victory was within reach. They also remembered the terror of 1943, the helplessness of being hunted by invisible enemies, the knowledge that each patrol would likely be their last. The psychological journey from one state to the other left survivors with trauma that lasted decades. The Battle of the Atlantic demonstrates a fundamental principle of modern warfare. Technological innovation, industrial capacity, and intelligence superiority will always defeat tactical excellence operating with obsolete systems. The U-boats represented tactical excellence. Donitz's coordination of Wolfpack attacks showed innovative operational thinking. German submarine crews displayed courage, skill, and determination. None of it mattered once the Allies deployed technologies that negated U-boat advantages. Courage cannot defeat radar. Skill cannot counter code breaking. Determination cannot overcome industrial capacity that replaces losses faster than they can be inflicted. The wolf packs had been the hunters, until the Allies changed the rules of the hunt. The rise and fall of the German U-boat wolf packs answers a fundamental question about modern warfare. Technological innovation, industrial capacity, and intelligent superiority will always defeat tactical excellence operating with obsolete systems. The U-boats that terrorized the Atlantic in 1942, sinking ships at ratios that threatened Britain's survival, were destroyed not by a single wonder weapon, but by the convergence of radar that eliminated darkness as cover, code breaking that turned communications into vulnerabilities, air power that closed safe zones, and production capacity that made losses irreplaceable. The 30,000 U-boat crew members who died, 3 out of every 4 who served, paid the price for a strategic vision that could not adapt to a technological revolution. Their transformation from confident hunters achieving 15-to-1 kill ratios to victims suffering 75% casualties represents the most dramatic reversal of fortune in naval history. It stands as a cautionary tale about the fatal consequences of tactical rigidity in the face of systemic change. The lessons extend beyond the Atlantic. Any military force that achieves dominance through tactical innovation faces the same risk. The advantage lasts only until the enemy develops countermeasures. The side that adapts faster, innovates more effectively, and mobilizes greater resources will prevail. The U-boat wolf packs dominated for 2 years. They were defeated in 2 months. The speed of that reversal demonstrates how quickly tactical advantage can collapse when facing systemic technological and industrial superiority. The human dimension cannot be forgotten. 30,000 men died in steel coffins at the bottom of the Atlantic. They were not monsters. They were sailors following orders, executing tactics they believed would win the war. They displayed courage and skill. They endured conditions of almost unimaginable horror. They died because their commanders could not adapt to a changed world, because their nation's industrial capacity could not match their enemies, and because the technologies they relied upon had been compromised and countered. Their deaths were tragic, unnecessary, and inevitable once the strategic balance shifted. The Battle of the Atlantic ended not with a climactic engagement, but with a whimper. U-boats continued sailing until the war's end, achieving little, dying in large numbers, sacrificed to a lost cause. The wolf packs that had once threatened to change the war's outcome became an afterthought, a defeated weapon system continuing operations out of inertia and propaganda necessity rather than strategic value. The hunters had become prey, and the prey had been nearly exterminated. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.